I'm Kimberly from Fat Quarter Shop, and today we're going to do something totally different. We are going to use a rainbow of colors to make a fun quilt. So let's get into it. The full color quilt is a step outside of my color comfort zone, but it's totally amazing. Believe it or not, this quilt comes down to just one block, the Economy quilt block. You piece it using the Economy Plus 12-inch foundation paper, and it makes your quilt look like it's on point, even though it's not. We're going to be using the Curated in Color collection by Cathe Holden and Moda Fabrics, and she has a vintage flair. She takes all of her designs from vintage pieces, and it's going to give you kind of a scrapbook of color look. Start by downloading the free full color quilt pattern at the Fat Quarter Shop website. The link is down below. When you're looking at the block, you have a white fabric. You will need 1 1/4 yards. You have the center fabric. You need 1 1/4 yards. Then you need 5 other fabrics that are just 1 yard each. And as we go, I'll talk more about the fabrics and how these fabrics can create this rainbow effect. You can really only do that with this fabric collection. And just so you know, the 1 1/4 yards is enough if you want to fussy cut those centers. And fussy cutting just means you cut out the parts of the fabric that you love the most and want to show off. So sometimes there is waste. So here is the block compared to the paper. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to fussy cut this part. That is going to go in this big section here. Your 12, 10, 13, and 11 are your backgrounds. And your 14, 16, 17, and 15 are your outsides. And we're going to be doing something really fun to create the colorway going down. Now, I wanted to show you this is an alternative. If you really care about the direction of your fabrics and you want all your fabrics facing up, that is doable. You need to order just a little bit more of the fabric if you want to do that. Or you can do it where the fabric is random. So this one, you can see the fabrics all go different directions, and you can see this one, all the fabrics face up. So you can have fun and kind of decide which way you want to go. I think scrappy's totally fine. So let's first talk about fabric placement and how it works with the paper. Your fabric A is going to be cut on the diagonal, and that is going to be 10, 11, 12, 13. Your fabric B is going to stay in a square, and it's going to go right here in between the dotted lines. Your fabric C's are going to get cut on the diagonal, and they are going to go in these outside points, which are 14, 15, 16, and 17. Now this pattern is really important for you to just start, cut everything, and then really read it, absorb it, and it will all start to make sense. You're going to be making 5 blocks that are this first column, and that's going to be reds and oranges. Your second column, you're going to make 5 that have orange and yellows. Then you're going to make 5 that have yellow and green. And then you're going to make 5 that have green and blue. That's going to coordinate also with your fabric Ds, which are your borders. And that's going to create this rainbow effect that's going to be totally beautiful. So just make sure you absorb everything in the pattern. And I'm going to show you how to make one of these blocks and give you lots of tips on working with foundation paper. So let's talk first about how you fussy cut and what goes in the center of the block. So right here, this is the center of the block, and you need to cut a square that's 6 7/8. So I would just cut a 7-inch square, and you really just want to make sure that you get it straight, because when it goes in the block, you want it to not be wonky. So to fussy cut, you would just decide and just look at your ruler and just look at the 7-inch part of it, and just kind of place it where you think. And what we did with this quilt is we just did a variety so that we got lots of yellows, reds, blues, greens, and we just made sure that we got a big variety of squares. But the main thing is when you're cutting this square, you want to make sure it's straight so it looks good in the center of your block. So we wrote this pattern to use the Economy Plus It's So Emma 12-inch paper. So you do have to have the paper. I'm going to tear 1 page out. And what I'm going to do is take the add a quarter plus ruler that's long, and I'm going to crease where we're going to be adding fabrics. So I'm going to do the first 4 on the outside. and you will understand as we go what that means. But these 4 outside, and then this square part. We're not making a center part, so you can ignore those lines. And so you can see we need to put our fabric B right in the center. But when you're working with foundation paper, you're going to actually be sewing on the opposite side. So I'm going to turn that over, and you can see my square right here. And you can make this fabric bigger or smaller. My main thing is I want it to stay as straight as possible. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue. That's just going to hold it in place and just make sure it is straight instead of crooked. So like I said, we're going to be putting our fabric on the wrong side of the paper. So we're going to go back to the right side of the paper, and we're going to trim. We're going to put this ruler right here on that dotted line and crease. So you're going to cut 1/4 inch away, and that's just going to make piecing this a lot easier and take any bulk out that you might have. And you can see we cut ours 7 inches instead of 6 7/8. And you see that I used that sew line glue, and it just kept everything in place, and you can see that now it's straight. If it doesn't look straight to you, you could maneuver it, but you need to make sure you still have that 1/4 inch away from that line. Now you're going to take your fabric A squares, and you're going to cut them on the diagonal, and you're going to need 4 triangles for 1 block. So you're going to turn this over, and we're going to be going in order of the number. So we're going to sew 10 and 11, then 12 and 13. So 10 is right here. I'm going to put my fabric right sides together. I'm going to use 2 pins, and you want to make sure you have extra above your fabric and extra below. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine. We're going to set our sewing machine smaller than you normally would. So if you normally stitch at a 2.0, you might want to stitch at a 1.5. I'm going to start stitching out here. I'm going to go all the way down directly on that line, and then I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch past. That will help with the paper coming off. Then you're going to take this, and don't use steam, just press. And we sewed 10, now we're going to add 11. So we'll put that on the other side, pin in place, leaving extra at the top and the bottom. And sew from here all the way down and past. Now what I want to do is I want to get, before I add 13 and 14, I want to get this chopped off. You can just chop those off with your scissors, or you can use the rotary cutter. And one thing I did want to point out is with this really bright fabric, doing a really white is going to really set that off. If you use like a darker fabric, it might not have enough contrast. So now we're going to attach 12 and 13, and it's going to look like that. So you're going to turn this over, and I'm going to pin this down. So this is 12, and then this is your line 13, and I'm going to pin this down. And I do try to remove my pins before I sew over them, and then I'm just going to sew straight down and just start and stop a little bit past your square line. So now we're going to trim the paper down. So we've done all the way through 13. Now we're going to go to 14. We're going to put the ruler right here and crease right on that line that we kind of started before. This creates a 1/4 inch seam and cut. And I'm going to do that on all 4 sides, and all 25 of your blocks start this way. It's the next step that you have to be careful with color placement. So if you wanted to, you could do all of your blocks here and then move to the next step and make sure you place your red, orange, greens, and blues in the right spot. So here's your block. And now I have a red fabric and an orange fabric. We're gonna pull our pattern back, and we're gonna put red on the size 14 and 17, and the orange on the 15 and 16. That's shown perfectly in the pattern. Now this is reversed, because it's paper piecing. So just make sure you follow the left diagram and not the right, because when you flip it, it's reversed. So I just need 16 and 15 to be red and 14 and 17 to be orange. So I'm gonna cut these on the diagonal. And so I have 2 oranges and 2 reds. And again, my first color is orange and it's 14. So I'm gonna go to 14, place an orange. And just make sure you keep that pattern and just follow your color on each of the blocks. You're gonna be making 4 different blocks, 5 each. And then when you turn to the other side, your color 15 is red. So I'm gonna pin that down. And again, you just kind of wanna center it as best you can. And then I'm gonna sew on this line all the way across and this line all the way across. And I am gonna start and end a little bit before. You don't have to do that, that's just my preference. And I wanted to show you, with this paper, you get this perfect point right here, which you would never get without paper. If you sew directly on the line, it makes this beautiful point right here, and just make sure this seam is nice and flat. If it's not flat, you'll have like a little duck pleat, and you could put your finger under it, and you don't want that. So I'm gonna do that same thing, trim the little points off. You could do it after, I just think it's easier to do it before. And then we're gonna look, and 16 is red, so we're gonna put 16 here, and I'm trying to center it as best as I can. 17 is orange, place that and center it the best you can. And then you're gonna sew all the way across the line on both sides, and then our first block will be done. So when you're looking at our paper, there is a line and it says do not trim and trim. So we want to trim on this outside line. So you can either trim just like this, trim, rotate, and trim, rotate, and just cut on those outside lines. That's one way. Or you can take a 12.5-inch square ruler and put it on those outside lines and cut. So either way will work. I'm gonna just use the outside lines just to show you how it works, but you can do either way. But cutting on these lines guarantees you have that 1/4-inch seam, and you just wanna make sure you cut on the outside line. The inside line is your seam allowance, so if you cut on that, you won't have a point. And that is how your first block looks. So you're gonna make 5 that have red and orange, 5 orange and yellow for the second column, 5 yellow and green for this third column, and 5 green and blue on this last column. And I wanted you to just look at how we did our colors. They're just random in the center. And I want to show you now how you remove the paper. Whenever I'm using foundation paper, it's always best, I find, that you just start on the outside and go in. So just pick an outside. This paper is nice and thin and it will just come off. If it's not coming off, the next block you make, shorten your stitch length. And you just want to get all the paper off, and this is something great your kids can do. So once you've got that outside ring off, then you just move to the inside. And then this inside piece is just one big piece. And just get any remnants off. And then I wanted to talk about when you start joining your blocks, I wanted to give you a tip. So right here would be these 2 blocks, red, orange, orange, yellow. But I want to give you a tip on how to get this to match. What I do is, it's called poke a pin. Put these right sides together. I'm gonna pin first on each end, and they should be exactly 12.5 using the paper. And then I'm going to take a pin, poke it in this very first point. Make sure it's in the point, go to this point, poke the pin, and then just hold the pin upright, take the pin out and pin once before and once after. And when you sew, that should match up perfectly. So once you've assembled your quilt top, it should measure 48.5 by 60.5. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a red piece of fabric on the left and a blue piece of fabric on the right. But the top and the bottom, we want that to join and match the stripe that we have been going with. And that is going to be achieved by assembling your fabric D rectangles. And of course, with this quilt, using a design wall or your floor will help keep everything in order. And when you are joining, just do the polka pin method right at these points so that everything lines up and you're going to have a beautiful quilt. So I want to show you on top of the quilt that we had quilted, I kind of want to show you the block placement so you can really visually see it. So that first block we made would go here, red, orange, and then orange, yellow, yellow, green, and green, blue. And you just want to make sure when you look at this, see how the points match up because we did the polka pin. And then this is your rectangles at the top. And you can see this is a red rectangle, an orange rectangle, yellow rectangle, green rectangle, and blue. And we pinned those right there, and that's going to create that effect. And I did want you to notice all of the outside areas we have planned the fabric, but this inside square we just did random fabrics so that it would just be random in the center but more planned on the outside, and you get this lovely, lovely fabric. And this backing print is really awesome. It's also one of Cathe Holden's prints, and I just feel like the color of it goes with the top, and it's just a fun backing. So for the long arm quilting, I decided we should use a swirly print because we have so many points on the front. And with a quilt like this, with all this color, I would never use a colored thread because then that just takes away from what you just built. So we used a cream thread that really doesn't show up on the top or the back, and it doesn't distract from the color creation that we just created. So here are a couple of different versions of the full color quilt in different fabric collections. Comment and let me know which one's your favorite. We've got 6 versions. Thanks so much for watching the full color quilt pattern design. I hope you've loved this. This is totally outside my comfort zone, but I know a lot of you will love it. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you soon.